But you'll see also that we've got ship up there, and we've got a guard. And you're probably thinking, well, why is that there? But if you remember that not only do we get the words, but we also get things that are associated with that word. So captain reminds people of ships. Guards are thought of when you think of captives. So as we get more of that sound, we get rid of more of the irrelevant things, but we're left with captain or captive. So which one is it? Then finally, the brain hears captain, and it gets rid of the ones that aren't relevant, but it still leaves the associated ideas. So now, if we have the word dare, okay, what could it be? It could be deck, it could be debt, it could be death, it could be death. Now, remembering that it will also bring all the associations with it. So when we think of death, we think of our own mortality, so we think of growing old. When we think of the deaf, we think of hearing aids. And so there's a link between the elderly and hearing aids because, of course, they're both things that you would wear as you get older. Now, the thing is that when we hear the fur, what should happen is that the idea of death should go. But because, as we all know, that when somebody has a reduction in their hearing, you're ahead of me. Even a mild reduction in their hearing, they often cannot tell the difference between a fur and a thur. So there is going to be a very strong link between deaf and death that will remind people of the elderly, always, if we carry on using that word. Now, we come along and we reinforce that because all of our images, and we've seen so many of them over these last couple of days, that they show people with grandchildren, we show people who are happily retired couples, all of these things. So what are we priming for here? What stereotypes are we reinforcing? Now, this is all based on the circular argument because we say to ourselves, well, we know that the majority of people who get hearing aids are 69 and over and are retired. So therefore, we need to attract more of those people because we know that they think hearing aids are relevant to them. So lo and behold, we try to attract them with things that will speak to them. And then lo and behold, we find that those people come through our doors. And lo and behold, the age never changes. Okay? And most of the stereotypes out there, we actually reinforce. We're the worst ones for it. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. Now, when we look at the statistics, this is what one of the speakers was saying about getting a baseline. The statistics are that 60% of people who may benefit from hearing aids are actually of working age. Okay, so that means the majority are of working age. So that means that 2 of the people that we currently leave behind are at least of working age. So simply by changing our messages to appeal to people of working age is going to open up the market to us, providing we get other things right. We'll come on to those in a little bit. So when they see images like the people with, who are elderly, what goes through their minds? Well, the first thing is that's not relevant to them. And so remember what we said about relevance and ready-made attitudes and raw ingredients? Hopefully you're starting to think ahead of me. They also look at that and they say, well, I don't want other people to think that I'm like that. Because if you think about it, we respond to the reason we like brands is because we feel it says something about us. It's an extension of our personality. So if they get a hearing aid, what's it saying about them? Okay, so the messages we currently send out is if you're working, avoid. If you're not old, avoid. If you're not deaf, avoid. But also, if you do not consider yourself to be old or don't want to be seen as old, or you do not see yourself as deaf. So these messages are not outside in society, they're coming from us. So we are actually excluding our biggest potential audience. So we need to rectify this. The first thing is we need to treat these people that we currently leave behind as a totally separate audience. Don't try and bring them into everything else we're currently doing. We need to market to them separately. We need to make sure that the messages that we use for them are tailored to them. The fact that they're working for a start would be a big thing. We also need to tailor our services. I realized recently, for example, that how can people come in and see me if they're working? It was because I was trying to make an appointment for a dentist, and I was thinking, well, I have no time during the day to make an appointment for the dentist. I want to go home and make an appointment when I come in from home. Come in from work. So what I did was I thought, okay, I want online booking. So we added online booking to our website. It's things like that, making sure our opening times or when working people could come in and see us, extending our hours, opening on Saturdays. Also, we should be keeping specific products to them so that we don't blur the boundaries, so that people can have a product that says something about them that they like. In our images, we shouldn't be showing just young people. I'm not saying that. We should be showing people of all ages. And we should be showing them enjoying their hearing. We shouldn't show them sedentary. We shouldn't show them going for a walk. We should be there, showing them there in the midst of the moment because their hearing is keeping them there. Now, I did actually have an image I wanted to show you of a restaurant group with lots of different people, all happy and laughing. So you just have to imagine it because I didn't have time to upload it. Also, the third thing is to choose your words carefully. Think about the things, the thought processes and the stereotypes that you are triggering, and think about the messages that you're sending through it, and whether you're triggering an avoid response or an approach response. Interestingly, I read an article last night that said that with avoid and response, if people feel powerful, they will approach something. If people feel weak, they will avoid something. Now, all of our messages are about how weak you are and how needy you are. So we're automatically sending a signal that says, avoid us. So we should at least avoid the word deaf in context aimed at these three people. So have separate sections on websites, have separate brochures, whatever. And we need to be focusing on the hearing and not some condition. Now, I'm going to look at that in a little bit more detail. We use something called framing. Now, framing, again, has been talked about over the last couple of days. Now, if you look at these two pictures of the Mona Lisa, it's both the same image, but we perceive the contents to be different. One of them looks more genuine, one of them looks more fake. And it's all because of the frame that's around it. So framing actually changes the way that we perceive something. And that works with words too. So if you ask somebody, how long was the movie, you'll get an overestimate of the time, whereas if you ask them how short was the movie, you'll get an underestimate of the time. It was the same content, but the frame was different, and so the perception was different. It's used in politics. Drilling for oil is replaced with exploring for energy. It happens in marketing, where instead of saying vegetarian, supermarkets will now say meat-free. They're framing it differently, because if you say vegetarian, you'll only attract vegetarians. But if you say meat-free, you attract vegetarians, you don't lose them, but you also attract other people that say, oh, well, I don't mind going without meat for this meal, it sounds a bit healthier. And so they've actually found that it increases their sales. We find it in health messages. So if you frame something in one way, you get a bigger response, and if you frame it in another way. Now let's look at the words that if you look at all of the brochures that we've had leading up to this conference, we'll have seen all of these words in there. We've heard them a lot during the conference as well. Now, what's the most important word on the screen there? Okay. Let's change those words. What's the most important word on the screen there? That's the most important word because that's the noun. Because you can't have an adjective without a noun. An adjective describes the noun. So let's bring it back to, where are we framing? Okay, we're focusing on the condition. And what happens when somebody has a condition? Or what happens if we tell somebody they have a condition? Does it make them feel powerful or does it make them feel weak? Okay, so what are they going to do? Avoid. Okay, we've got a serious problem here, haven't we? Okay, but if we change it to hearing, hearing is attractive. Why? Because it makes us be ourselves. We can bring that hearing to whatever situation. It means that if we're a witty person, we can respond with the right punchline. It means that if we're a caring person, we can show that we're listening and respond correctly to people. If we're good in business, it means that we can pick up on those opportunities before anybody else does. And so that is an approach signal. So looking at some of the language that we currently use, we've changed everything that we say. For example, we don't say detect a hearing loss when we're talking about hearing tests, for example. We say detect changes in your hearing, because changes is a neutral word. It can be good or bad, so it's not activating a stereotype. Also, it's also putting the focus on the hearing. We don't say you have a high-frequency hearing loss. We say some of the speech currently falls outside of your hearing range. We're putting the emphasis on their hearing range, because they still have a hearing range. Okay, they might have a hearing loss to you and me, but they still have a hearing range, and they can do things with that hearing range. But there are just a few things out of there that we need to bring back in. We don't say test your hearing. Michael Maslansky picked up on this, didn't he, yesterday? So we say baseline your hearing, because everyone understands the idea of a baseline, or we say profiling your hearing, because it says what your hearing range can and can't do. We don't say you need hearing aids, because need, does that make people feel powerful or weak? Weak. So what will it do? It will make people feel as if they should avoid. Okay, so, and I tested this on my daughter, poor girl, and I said to her, Cara, if I told you that you needed some special shoes, what goes through your mind? And her face fell, and she sort of said, that there's something wrong with me. So the word need is a very powerful word, and we need to frame it differently. So we say, we want to bring those sounds back within your hearing range. It's far more positive, and it's also framing for hearing. I hope this is useful. So we keep the focus on the hearing, and we don't hand them a condition they'll want to reject or run from. Now, I noticed, for example, as I came in today, that there's a poster up there, and I'm going to get into trouble for saying this. And it sort of says, let's take the fatigue out of life. Now, fatigue, does that make somebody feel powerful or weak? Okay, so will they approach or avoid? Okay, so we're almost there, but we're not quite there. So what we need to do is we need to change that message to be something more like, you shine, others fade. In other words, we're putting the focus on what somebody can do because of what we enable them to do. And so the way that you'd run an advert with that is that you'd show, for example, the perfect hostess of a dinner party or something, going here, there, and everywhere, everyone else fading throughout the day, but them still being full of energy. And then you'd sort of say, you shine, others fade, the Oticon Antigua. Just an idea. Now, look, we see this in other things. For example, we don't say, are you fat? Come to us and we'll help you. We have messages like this, I just lost 2 pounds. In other words, we put the focus on how people want to see themselves. Even if they're not there yet, they want to see themselves. And so if I respond to that message, I'll be saying, well, that's how I want to be. We don't see things like this we see things like this. Yet in our profession, we do things like this. Or we say things like this. There are so many ready-made attitudes that we are giving to society that are wrong here, and we can change it. Look at all these things here, for example. The lady there, first of all, there's a transfer of emotion. So we look at her and she's struggling. So we relate that struggle to ourselves, and then whatever we see about the advert to the message. Also, we're using stereotyping there. So I've got plenty of clients who are my age, but the thing is that they don't see themselves as being old. Even older people don't see that. If you take that, we've already talked about framing for the condition. We've talked about testing. We'll come to that a little bit later on. And this is something else that's very important. It's the associations that we make. For example, this is called classical conditioning. And even if we're not aware of the term, we'll all recognize it. This is Pavlov's dog, okay? I don't think it's the real one. Pavlov was a Russian scientist who, for some strange and bizarre reason, I think he had his reasons really, but he wanted to collect dribble from dogs, okay? And what he noticed was that whenever he gave them food, they dribbled or they drooled. So what he started to do, because he was a scientist, he started to, watch the tongue, every time he gave them some food, he also rang the bell. And then what he did was he started to do this over and over again and repeated it. So eventually, when he rang the bell, the dog dribbled, but there was no food. The dog went hungry, obviously, I don't know. But what was going through the dog's mind was there was an association with that bell and food. So it activated all the same behavior as if those two things were still there. So this is called classical conditioning, and it's very, very important to us as one of the tools that we use to shape attitudes. And basically, we simply take two things and we associate them together, and we repeat it, re-repeat it, re-repeat it, re-repeat it. And then eventually you show a person one thing, and it triggers all of those things.